The most common and tiring question that superhero fans constantly come across is Marvel or DC? I've literally been asked this question multiple times in real life, and I can never really choose one. I understand that for some, they easily prefer one over the other because of their personal taste. But I can't really decide on one because I love them both so much. It's like when a relative asks me which of my parents I like the most. I can't decide on one, so I just say both, and that is a valid answer. Some people think you can only select either Marvel or DC, but that is not the case. Both universes are so rich with a plethora of amazing characters and astonishing tales told over the course of decades. So I don't really understand why some people so strictly adhere to one company without at least being a little open to the other. It is objectively impossible to definitively crown one company superior to the other. But the fact that I think they're equal in terms of quality doesn't mean both universes are exactly the same. They definitely have a ton of commonalities, but they also have clear differences. And today we are going to discuss one seemingly slight difference between Marvel and DC Comics that actually shapes the way we view their characters and universes as a whole. My name is Joshua C, and today we are going to talk about the locations of the Marvel and DC universes. To put it more accurately, I'm referring to the way superheroes of the Marvel and DC universe are spread across their respective worlds and the type of locations that they're in. In Marvel Comics, a lot of characters reside in the very real New York, with a few exceptions like Black Panther living in Wakanda, Ms. Marvel in New Jersey, and the X-Men moving to different locations throughout the course of their really long history. The heroes of DC Comics, on the other hand, live in fictional cities and are spread throughout the world, or well, America, to put it more specifically. This difference may seem minute, but upon further analysis, you'll see how drastically it affects the way we view the world of Marvel and DC. So let's get into that. The first thing I want to talk about is the effect created from Marvel's New York as opposed to the fictional cities of DC. What's so cool about the former is obviously the realism aspect of it. The creators at Marvel decided that their heroes live in the Big Apple because that was the very location that their office was in. The staff knew the city really well, and because of that, they could incorporate it perfectly onto the page, landmarks and all. Gwen Stacy was killed in either the George Washington Bridge or the Brooklyn Bridge, even though those are both in different states and it's pretty confusing which one it is. The fact that they are real and you can visit them is genuinely exciting. To add upon that, there's something so breathtaking about Daredevil being the guardian of Hell's Kitchen and it being an actual neighborhood in New York. Another really cool example of this is the Spider-Man video game, which I dream of playing someday. I live in Asia, so I don't really know or care about New York that much, but for the residents of that city, it must have been so cool to play the Spider-Man video game and be able to swing around and admire an altered version of where they live. A lot of Marvel's heroes, even if they're outside of New York, are still in highly urbanized areas that are pretty realistic, and as a result, these cities feel grounded, much like the characters that live in them with their flaws and relatable characteristics. On the other hand, DC's fictional locations have a completely different effect, but it's one that I believe is just as influential on the way we view its world. Let's start with the first page of Nightwing issue 21 from the 2016 comic series, a moment that has shockingly been living in my head rent-free for more than a year, despite my forgetfulness when it comes to most things. Quote, When you've been in the crime fighting business as long as I have, you learn that the time of day affects cities in different ways. In Metropolis, crime always seems to happen at high noon. In Gotham, evil has a habit of striking at midnight. Here in Bloodhaven, twilight is the witching hour. Yup, right on cue. End quote. So, why did this quote hit me as hard as it did when I read it? Well, it made me realize how well defined and unique the fictional cities of the DC universe are. When you think of Metropolis, a vivid image of it appears in your head. Bright colors and wonderful scenery creating a positive and almost utopia-like vibe. You can see Superman's impact on Metropolis through the way it looks, and it is really astounding. It's hard to encapsulate real cities like New York in one or two words, because real life isn't really all that black and white. But with imaginary locations and each major superhero having their own, the cities themselves can be more creative and more linked to the hero of their choice. Batman and the streets of Gotham have been so intertwined over the years that if one was without the other, it would feel wrong. Batman fighting aliens in outer space is occasionally cool, but the character doesn't feel as true if he's not in Gotham City. Because most of the DC heroes are spread out and have their own designated location, the writer and artist can shape the world around them in order to fit the story they're trying to tell. Aquaman's Atlantis, Darkseid's Apokolips, Flash's Central City, Wonder Woman's Themyscira, these locations and more are absolutely iconic, and they each have their own unique look, feel, and vibe that make you go, whoa. This is something else. Most of the locations in the DC universe feel more fantastical and grand, and that makes it stand out compared to the more realistic Marvel universe, even though it still does have fictional locations like Krakoa and Asgard. But back to the DC universe, those locations make the world feel larger than life, flourishing with diversity and wonder unlike anything we have ever seen before. Now that we've explored the effect of Marvel Comics having more realistic locations and DC having more mythical ones, let's move on to something else. Let's talk about the way that the characters are distributed and spaced. In the DC universe, each major hero has their own designated location. As mentioned earlier, this has allowed the locations themselves to be distinct and special, but it also displays their power. As opposed to the Marvel's New York, which still has a ton of villains despite the countless heroes that live there, DC's characters feel more independent of one another. Green Arrow characters mostly live in Starlet City, and so it feels like Oliver is the king of that place. Batman very much embodies Gotham City, so much so that he is very possessive of it. In the first volume of the New 52 Justice League series, he tells Green Lantern, quote, "Take your flashlight and go home. Gotham City's mine, Coast City's yours." End quote. Yikes, Bats, no wonder you have to adopt children just so you won't be lonely. Back to the main point, DC's popular characters having their own territory, plus having their own set of sidekicks and friends themed around them, makes DC Comics' most popular heroes truly feel larger than life. And especially in terms of power, they are. This is what makes DC's roster of heroes so cool. Their astounding level of power. The ability to control almost every aspect of the ocean, run so fast that you can travel through time, conjure up anything according to your will, and so much more. Okay, now let's switch back to the Marvel Universe. In the world of Marvel, everyone's kind of cramped in New York City. This gives the heroes a sense of community. They can possibly encounter one another and help each other out. The characters of the Marvel Universe feel much more tightly knit, and the fact that a lot of them live not too far apart from one another implies that they need each other. There are so many heroes in New York, and yet crime is still always around the corner. Marvel characters, generally speaking, aren't as powerful as DC's. Unlike the godlike characters that inhabit the DC universe, Marvel's heroes are supposed to be human and relatable. In the fourth volume of the very charming Miss Marvel series titled The Last Days, something terrible happens. The sky turns red and Kamala Khan has no idea what is going on. She meets Captain Marvel, her idol, for the first time, and she is absolutely loving every second of it. They save Kamala's brother together, and then Carol tells her that the world might be ending soon. As Captain Marvel leaves to help deal with whatever world-ending threat is in New York, Kamala is faced with something that is out of her control. The world is ending, and she can do absolutely nothing about it, except help her neighborhood, spend time with her family and friends, and hope that everything is going to turn out okay. It's an absolutely amazing and heartwarming story arc that shows how helpless some of the Marvel characters really are. To beat a world-ending threat, they really need every character to give their all. Marvel heroes are designed to be more relatable and human. It's what made the company special in the first place when it started to take off in the 60s, and it's still something very integrated into Marvel today. It's really cool that the locations of the Marvel and DC universe reveal so much about its world and characters. Sure, there are exceptions and counter-arguments to what I've stated, but I think my argument still holds some weight. Through analyzing the worlds of DC and Marvel, we can see the differences between both companies and what makes them special. DC, with their fantastical locations with strong vibes and themes, coupled with powerful characters that we can look up to, contrasts well against Marvel's realistic urban landscapes filled with vulnerable and relatable characters. It's crazy how we can obtain so much from one seemingly minute detail. In the words of Pinkie Pie herself,
then one small thing is not so small. One small thing can be the biggest thing of all.
So I'm assuming most of you have left by now, but if you're still here, I suggest that if you enjoy the video, give it a like. If you want to see more, maybe subscribe and tap the notification bell if you want to be updated whenever I upload a new video. I really hope you enjoyed this video and continue to have a good day. My name is Joshua C, and I will see you in the next comic book video.